So, what if I told you there's a hidden power that's been secretly shaping human history for, the last 10,000 years? It's a pretty wild claim, right? Well, today, we're diving into a set of sources that say exactly that. We're going to break down this alleged shadow empire from its ancient beginnings all the way to the unique spiritual solution they propose to fight back. Welcome to the Lenny and Maria Sanchez podcast and video show. All right, here's our roadmap for this journey. We'll start with the huge claim of a 10,000-year empire and really try to get inside the heads of its supposed rulers. Then, we'll look at the pretty dark methods of control they allegedly use. After that, things get a little more personal as we explore this concept of shadows, a problem they say lives inside every single one of us. And finally, we'll get to the spiritual solution the sources offer to fix it all.
Okay, let's just jump right in. The central idea from our source material is absolutely staggering. It's the claim that a single hidden power structure, which it calls the Satanic Phoenician Empire, has been running things behind the scenes nonstop for 10,000 years?
And according to these texts, this empire's reach is just massive. It supposedly kicked off 10,000 years ago, setting up shop in ancient power centers like Sumer and Rome. The source claims its influence just kept rolling through the Middle Ages, pulling the strings in places like Venice, and even directing groups you've definitely heard of, like the Vikings and the hordes of Genghis Khan. And now, well, they say its main hubs are in cities like London and Washington.
And here you can see just how directly the source connects all these dots. It flat out asserts that historical figures like Genghis Khan weren't independent leaders at all, but basically field agents taking direct orders from a central command post in Venice. It even describes him as a Phoenician. It's a total rewriting of history as we know it.
So, if this empire is real, what on earth makes its rulers tick? What's their motivation? The source material tries to answer that by digging into their core philosophy, and it's this kind of inverted mindset that's apparently key to understanding everything they do. This slide really lays out the fundamental conflict the source is talking about. You've got two opposing worldviews. On one side, you have a healthy approach to life, tied to morality and wisdom. But on the other, you have what the text calls oligarchical metaphysics, a philosophy that's described as a complete rejection of natural law, where you worship an evil god and literally train yourself to love what is evil and unlovable. So, how does this twisted philosophy actually translate into real-world control? Well, the source claims that throughout history, this oligarchy had a specific toolkit. They'd supposedly bankroll brutal groups like the Vikings to act as their muscle and just smash their enemies. They'd cook up powerful myths, like the whole bloodline of Jesus story for certain kings, to make their puppets seem divine. And they'd use local worship centers to bend populations to their will. Okay, now we're going to get into some of the really disturbing stuff. We're exploring the methods the source claims are used to control leaders inside this system. It details a whole process of ritual and psychological manipulation that's designed to guarantee absolute loyalty. Now, the source is incredibly specific here. It defines Satanism not as some belief system, but as a set of actions. These rituals, and they list things like human sacrifice, torture, and pedophilia, are presented as a kind of technology. A technology used to systematically shatter a person's conscience, creating psychopathic leaders who are therefore completely controllable. And blackmail is described as the central mechanism of control. It apparently follows a very clear escalating path. It starts by entrapping powerful people and videotaping them. Then, to prove their loyalty and move up the ladder, these people are forced to take part in rituals that get more and more horrific, which the source claims ultimately culminates in the murder of children. And to argue that this is a repeating pattern throughout history, the text points to this number, 72. The claim is that 72 different empires have risen and flourished over time, only to be infiltrated and completely destroyed from the inside by this very same elite group. So, after laying out this massive external threat, the source material does a complete 180 and pivots to an internal one. It argues that the real, true root of all this evil isn't the empire itself, but something inside the human mind that it calls the shadow. The text actually brings in this quote from the famous psychologist Carl Jung to frame the problem. The argument they're making is that while brilliant thinkers like Jung could identify and describe this shadow, they never offered a practical, step-by-step solution to deal with it. And that, the source claims, is the gap that it's here to fill. Now, this is a really core concept. The shadow is supposedly made up of what the source calls shadow subpersonalities. Think of them like rogue programs or virtual machines running in your mind, completely cut off from any good or divine energy. To survive, they have to basically vampirize the energy of their host or of other people through all sorts of negative behavior. And the source claims that over many lifetimes, these things can grow in power until they just completely take over. Okay, so after defining this massive problem, both on the outside with the Empire and on the inside with the Shadow, the source material offers a very specific solution. This last section is all about the proposed path to what it calls spiritual liberation. And the solution is laid out as this practical, 7-step process. It involves techniques with some pretty interesting names, like alchemical vitriol, which is described as a method for dissolving all that negative energy. The whole goal is to wipe out negative emotions, tap into spiritual energy, and fully integrate with your soul, which would, in theory, get rid of the shadow for good. And the promised results of doing all this? Well, they're pretty significant. The source claims that by following this path, a person can totally remove all their energy blockages, get rid of all the evil inside them, gain psychic powers, and even achieve enlightenment. And, interestingly, it also lists some very material benefits, like creating blooming health and walloping wealth. Thank you for listening to another session of the Lenny and Maria Sanchez podcast and video show produced and archived at the website notebooklmvideos.com.